Hello everyone. In this lecture, I will be talking about human-centered artificial intelligent systems. Okay. Um, in this lecture, I have chosen a case study, which is about designing and developing a user-centric chatbot for businesses, right? And this chatbot system that we are going to design and develop, that must be AI driven, right? Which is very important, right? So using user-centered AI design strategies, right? The question is how to make your chatbot system to be user-centric, and at the same time it should be AI driven, right? Then this chatbot will be integrated into your existing systems, such as your e-commerce website or like your CRM system or any other enterprise applications, for example, right? But the most important question here is how to make um, your chatbot to be AI driven and also like to be user centric, right? So this is very important. And this topic is like very much related to human-centered AI, right? Because um, developing a chatbot is a part of, right, AI system development, right? So it can be either a system, right? Your chatbot can be, it can be the entire system, or maybe it can be one of the features in your AI system, right? You can choose, you can decide based on your business requirements, right? But in this case, we will look into this chatbot development as a kind of like, uh, an AI feature development, right? This chatbot will be used as a feature, right? But the highlight here is when you're developing your chatbot, which is AI driven, but the question is how to make this chatbot to be user centric, right? So in this case, we will look into the process of our chatbot development based on the user centered design, right? So using the user centered design framework, we will try to make your chatbot, AI driven chatbot, to be user centric. So we will go through step by step, right, in user centered design. All right. At the same time, we will integrate with a data pipeline. Later, I will talk about this. And together, we will create a user centric as well as AI driven a chatbot system for your businesses, right? So this is what we want to achieve today. Okay, so these are specific objectives that we want to achieve today, right? So first of all, we will look into like user-centric strategies in designing, AI-driven chatbots, right? And these chatbots are aligned with your business requirements. They are aligned with users' requirements, right? So this is what we want to achieve, right? And secondly, we were trying to understand the process, right? So as I mentioned, we will use user-centered design framework or like process to design and develop an AI-driven chatbot, right? But the highlight here is we are looking into large language model driven chatbot, right? So in the future slides, I'm going to talk more details about large language model driven. What do you mean by LLM driven chatbot, right? And this is like we want to achieve. And this LLM driven chatbot must be aligned with like what you want to achieve in your organization, in your business, you know, company, right? So this is what we want to achieve. And the next objective here is like we were trying to do a very quick hands-on activity using a chat-based.co, right? It's kind of like zero code platform. You may or may not have technical knowledge. It doesn't matter, right? So by using this user-friendly chat-based .co, we were designed and developed a an interactive AI-driven and user-centric chatbot system for whom for your business, right? So this is what we want to achieve. And I would say more importantly, right? So remember, like our focus here is human-centered AI, right? So how will you make sure your AI system or like your AI feature is user-centered or like human-centered, right? So by going through all these different stages and using different strategies, we will make sure that the AI feature we are developing is user-centric, right? And we are also interested in chat-based.co. The reason is, as I mentioned before, you may or may not have technical knowledge. It doesn't matter. Chatbase can offer you how to quickly prototype uh, an effective chatbot, like, less than 1 hour, for example, right? Which is why we are interested, like, how or what makes this tool or like framework user friendly and also usable, right? So we will look into chatbase.co through the lens of user-centered design and also user experience design, right? So what are the design factors or like design strategies they use when it comes to designing uh, an AI tool for, you know, users with or without coding skills, but they still can use, right? So this is what we want to achieve, what we want to understand in this lecture. All right. So this is um I believe most of you guys are already familiar with this, right? So what do you mean by a user-centric AI interface, right? So um, this is one of the lecture series in user interface design. Of course, we need to look into conventional systems such as website or like mobile interfaces, right? And of course, we have learned so much about traditional conventional human-computer interaction design theories, and of course, the practices, right? But the question here is like, all these existing theories and practices and UX laws, are they also applicable for AI interfaces, right? We are interested, right? And more importantly, we are interested in like asking questions as well as answering this question: what makes AI interface be user centric, right? When we are designing AI interfaces or like AI systems, what are the design strategies, UX laws, human computer interaction theories we should apply to make AI systems user friendly, usable, effective, and ultimately it will create more improved, better user experiences for our end users, right? So which is why we are interested in this regard, right, in this lecture. So by theory, a user-centric AI interface is an AI system, right, that is designed for um, you know, addressing or like solving the user problems and fulfilling the user needs, right? So for example, like, you design like, the GPT driven question and answering like system, right? So the question is, what is the objective of doing this, right? This AI system, right? So the ultimate goal here is to fulfill user needs, right? So this is very foundational but still very important for your users, right? So prioritizing or like empathizing user needs is still very important in user-centric AI interfaces, right? So the same thing in like, in our conventional user-centered design, right? In design thinking or human-centered design, fulfilling, prioritizing user needs is like very important so that like we can provide intuitive like user interface design, personalized contents, right? Seamless user interactions, right? Between the user and the AI system, right? And the next question is like, why user-centric AI interface? So in the past, 5, 10 years, like even more, right? People in industry, market, or like academic, they had been paying, a great attention to the technical aspect of AI systems, such as like algorithms, very complex mathematical like formulas, optimization, so and so, right? But since the GPT has been emerged and well adopted by like millions of users around the world, you know people in both academic and research and like in industry, they are paying like um, I would say like equal attention to the user side of the story, because previously we didn't pay too much attention, but AI now has become like, um kind of like, a trend, or even it has become like, a necessity in our daily lives, right? For example, like, myself or like yourself, all right, we need to use like, these language models as a tool in streamline our daily life, such as kind of like writing or like paraphrasing, summarizing, asking questions, information mining, you name it, right? So since they have become um essential in our daily lives, it is important to look into, again, right, the user side of the story, right? How to make it user friendly, how to make it trustworthy, how to make it responsible, how to make it explainable. These are the questions that we should ask to make your AI interface user centric and usable, right? So this is what we want to achieve in our lecture today, right? So as I mentioned, right, I have chosen a chatbot development as a case study, right, in this lecture. So I would say every one of us here, right, we have known or like used chatbot for maybe more than a decade, right? So since Web 2.0, when you are when you were using like e-commerce system or like a particular website, from time to time we encounter or like we interacted with um chatbot systems, right? So whenever like you want to ask questions or like you have query like to ask, then you type and ask questions to the chatbot, right? Then chatbot will be kind of like processing your queries, and they will generate like relevant answers to you, right? So for example, chatbot has become very popular since Web 2.0 because they can take care of human tasks. For example, like if you're selling something online, right? Or like you are providing some kind of services online, right? You cannot be there like as a human being like 24/7, right? So it is very hard for you to like to answers all the queries. We cannot handle it, right? Which is why we have been using chatbots for quite some time. But the only difference here is the chatbot before and the chatbot right now. There is a huge difference because the conventional traditional chatbots, they use rule-based algorithms. For example, based on the user's question, user's query, like they were kind of like if else condition, and it's simply said, but it can be more complex. But based on the rules, right, then it will basically generate the contents or like answer your questions, right? So which is why their usefulness was limited. First of all, they couldn't answer accurately, or they couldn't provide relevant answers to you, right? And they have very limited intelligence, right? So because like they are all rule based, which is why their answers may be quite limited, or like even they couldn't do the personalized recommendations or personalized suggestions to you, right? Because the way we architect the rule-based chatbot is like very limited. But when it comes to AI today, AI-driven chatbot, right? So they are becoming very popular nowadays. Like when you are using chatbot systems on various websites or like applications, they are very powerful, right? And they are very intelligent. The reason is the chatbot is AI driven, right? Being AI driven basically means that, it can think like human being, it can think like perform like human being. Even in some cases, like the chatbot can outperform the human beings, right? And the reason is like that chatbot here is like integrated with AI model behind, or even large language model that we are going to talk, right? So they have like a brain inside, right? Inside the system. So having a brain basically means it has intelligence, right? So it's like human-like chatbots, like they can think like a human being, they can act, they can perform like a human being, right? Which is very interesting. The reason is the model the chatbot is using, uh it must be trained on like a vast, or like a large, a huge amount of data, right? And mathematically it is like very complex behind, right? And they are basically trained on the real world data, huge amount of data, right? And they have reasoning, right? They can think like human being, which is why nowadays like AI driven chatbots are like human being, or even smarter or more intelligent than human beings. As a result, their answers, their questions are more personalized, more contextual. Contextual basically mean like context aware, basically means the chatbot, the AI system knows what you are asking. Are you asking about this or like that in that area or in another area? So they can clearly know the context that you are asking. And at the same time, they can understand the conversation like human being. It has become very natural, right? You are talking to another human being, right? So these are like very, you know, obvious benefits in using AI-driven chatbots compared with rule-based chatbot, right? So, um, in this lecture, I will be, focusing on large language model driven like chatbot systems for your businesses, right? So the question is how to design and develop, and LLM driven chatbot for your systems, and this chatbot must be intelligent and at the same time user centric, right? So I will quickly talk about this. What is a LLM driven chatbot? It's a conversational agent, right? Powered by a very powerful language model such as like GPT or like Llama or like Gemini or like many models in like Hugging Face, for example, right? So your chatbot is using one of these models out there, and these language models are like trained on huge amount of data, right? They have very complex algorithms and like architecture like neural network or like deep learning architecture. They definitely outperforms human employee, right? When it comes to like taking complex queries and you know making your answers reasonable, and also they can provide like very intelligent answers, right? So they are not like rule based, if else you know rule based algorithm. So which is why by using the like pre-trained data model and like very complex architecture like transformers, the way the chatbot, which is LLM driven, can be performing like human being, right? And the answers are like, very personalized, very intelligent, and also very useful, right? So these are the things that we can have in terms of using like, language model based chatbot, like human like responses, and they are very natural, right? Thanks to the language model NLP, right? Natural language processing architecture, right? Context aware conversation is basically like, um, even chatbots, like they can guide you, like, to reach to your goals, right? Sometimes you may not know like what direction that you want to go, like by asking questions. In that case, a chatbot can basically like uh add or perform like human being and like guide you to reach to your user goals, right? So LLM driven chatbots excel in complex and dynamic interactions, offering more complex, more sophisticated, and of course, more improved, like flexible user experience, right? So this is like very, very important here, right? So why we need to make your chatbots like, user-centric, accessible, interactive, consistent, right? Which is very, very important, right? So nowadays, like chatbots are becoming very intuitive, right? So since the chat GPT, right, the way we interact with like, the bot systems, chatbots are becoming very intuitive, right? And it is very responsive to the customer needs, right? It has become more personalized, right? So if you can design it like your chatbots in a very user-centric way, what will happen here is kind of like the the totality of user experience will be improved, right? So you feel like you are talking to another person. You can ask like questions and you will get the answers, and that will make you satisfied with the results, right? With the content, right? So which is why user-centric city in chatbot development is very, very important, right? So these are a few like, but important guidelines: the accessibility, interactivity, consistency, they are important, still very important in AI driven interface development, right? So the in the end, what we want to achieve here is we want to create a seamless user experience, right? So users, they are using your chatbot, they ask questions, and they will reach to the like user goal, and finally they get the answers that and that they are waiting for, they are expecting, right? And more importantly, it will solve the user problems efficiently and effectively as well. Okay, so these are important design principles or guidelines when it comes to designing and developing our chatbot systems. So clarity is very important, and we are still maintaining the simplicity, right? So that user may not get confused. Immediate feedback is like, very important. It's like, acting spontaneously, right? The chatbot will provide users with instant responses, feedback, guidance, and so on, right? So guided interactions here is very, very important. Responsiveness, right? So acting like human being. What if the chatbot is thinking like, 2 minutes to answer your questions? That may not be a responsive interactive, right? So this is important, and the chatbot must be acting consistently across platforms and the devices. They are very, very important here. Right. So this is the framework that I mentioned before. I believe like you guys have already known it, like user-centered design. Okay, this is our conventional user-centered design framework that contains like four different stages, right? When it comes to designing and developing an interactive user-centric AI system, right? So this is very important. So by using this framework as a kind of like a process, a guidance, a framework, what you can we want to achieve here is in the end we can design, develop, and deliver a user-centric AI system. Right. So what we need to do is basically first of all like understand the context of use, right? Okay, actually this diagram is from interaction design organization, which is like a digital library or like a portal for like UX designers. I recommend you to look into this, right? So coming back to the user-centered design, right? So understanding context of use is very important. In which context are you going to are you basically means your users, right? Going to use your chatbot system, right? So to be able to use the chatbot systems, first of all, we need to understand, right? What are the user requirements, right? So this is very, very important. Understanding user needs, user requirements, and the chatbot, right? The next important one is your chatbot to be able to answer business-driven, organizational-driven answers. What chatbot should know all the information about your organization, right? So this is very, very important, which is why at this stage you need to understand user needs very clearly. And at the same time, you need to clearly understand your organizational requirements, your organizational needs, and the objectives that you have to clarify and define it here so that you will be able to design and develop an AI driven, organizational driven chatbot system for your consumers, right? So understanding user needs, understanding business needs, very important. Then how you can achieve, you can do like interviews, surveys, document analysis, stakeholder interviews. This is another huge topic, user-centered design, right? So generally speaking, like requirements gathering from both user side and also business side, right? Moving on to specify user requirements, we will basically specifying very important user needs and also business needs, right? So functional requirements, non-functional requirements, your business policies, business needs, and also the product information, they are all important for your AI feature, which is a chatbot, right? So right here, we are very clear with like user needs that can be transformed into features, functionalities, and so on. And the business needs, business information, business policy, they can be changed to like a knowledge database for your chatbot, right? Then what we are going to do is we need to create the chatbot by prototyping, right? After prototyping, we will try to evaluate the um two things, right? First of all, the testing, evaluation of the contents generated by your chatbot, right? So I will be asking like a few questions to your chatbot, and the way it answers is reliable. Is it generating accurate, relevant, context aware, contextually aware responses or like outputs or not, right? We need to evaluate, right? So this is the first approach. Secondly, what you need to do is you need to integrate your chatbot with the the business system. It can be an e-commerce system, right? Then let your users use the chatbot and evaluate it, which is like usability testing or user testing, right? So this is the iterative approach, right? We will go through the process in a very iterative fashion or like manner, right? So this is all about the user-centered design framework like that we are going to like go through. Okay, so when it comes to like the project life cycle, right? So if you're into the project management, like the this user-centered design and your project management life cycle uh can be used as a hybrid format, or like it can be integrated into each other, right? So for example, project initiation, planning, that can be fit with understanding the context of use, right? So um specifying user requirements may be a part of it, a part of like execution, but of course design solutions and like evaluation can be execution, and like maybe evaluation can be a part of like review, and like we can iterate it, right? Iterate it. So this is how we can go through like two methodologies like together. Okay, so when you're talking about user-centered design, it is kind of like a an umbrella term, right? So under this, the question is how to make AI systems to be user-centric, right? So to be able to make AI systems user-centric, make sure we need to use user-centered design. So your AI-driven chatbot can be uh, a feature and a particular AI system. Or maybe your AI driven chatbot can be like, one whole system as well, based on what you want to achieve here, right? But the idea is make sure you are guiding your project through user-centered design framework or strategy, right? So I will talk a little bit more details about like understand context of use. So in user-centered design, we should always like start with understanding the context, right? Context basically mean in which our environment, in which circumstance users are going to use your system. For example, a chatbot for e-commerce. So the users, the consumer, when are they going to use your chatbot? Whenever they are like purchasing something or like they have questions in mind, they will kind of like, use the chatbot. So to achieve this, like what we need to know, what we need to prepare for. First of all, your chatbot must be, trained with a lot of like business information, business data, so that the chatbot can answer like more accurate, relevant information back to the user, right? And the next important one is like understanding user needs, right? So what users want to achieve, right? What are their user goals? We need to understand it, right? So at this stage, what we are going to do is we were trying to understand, we were trying to empathize user needs, and at the same time, like we will try to, like uh, identifying all the business information, business requirements, business goals, right? So understanding user needs is for like, for developing like user-friendly features and functionalities that will solve their pain points, right? Understanding business needs is basically to develop a knowledge based of your organization, and this knowledge based will be used for like a chatbot later on, right? So what you're going to do is you conduct like user research, developing personas, data analysis, affinity diagram. So they are all useful in this stage of user-centered design. Now, moving on to user requirements. At this stage, like we need to analyze all the data that are collected in like stage number one, and we analyze it and we specify very unique, specific features and functionalities of your system, your chatbot, right? And these features and functionalities are transformed into the features and functionalities are developed based on the specific user needs, right? And again, business goals, as I mentioned, you have to be very clear at this stage, specifying user requirements, because uh, in the next stage, you are going to design and develop a chatbot, right? So we need to train, we need to feed a lot of business driven information and the data into the chatbot system, right? Which is why this stage is very critical, right? So that in this stage we are kind of like um, integrating all the business policies, business information, product information, and channel into your user-centric chatbot design pipeline, right? So in this way, there is a channel between your organizational information and also your chatbot, right? Make sure like they are streamlined in terms of like data pipeline, right? So that will include integrating business policies, rules, and information into the chatbot. We need to train the chatbot. We need to feed the data into the chatbot so that in the end, right, you will be able to design and develop an organizational driven chatbot for your system, right? For your e-commerce, for your website, right? Now moving on to like design solutions. Okay, we already have identified or specified specific you know, functionalities, functional requirements, or like even non-functional requirements, business requirements, like, knowledge database, right? We are more or less ready to start like creating a real chatbot, right? Which is called prototyping and also like development in design solutions, right? So now we are going to create chatbot solutions that are user-centric and that chatbot solutions that are user-centric and AI driven, and of course it will meet user needs while like supporting business objectives, like achieving the business objectives here, right? So in this case, right, we are very interested in this case study of like chatbase.co, which is kind of like very easy zero code tool, and just plug and play in your e-commerce system, right? But the idea is like before we use a chatbase.co, before we create a chatbot in like chatbase.co, we need to understand like the process, the architecture, the way it works, right? So that it will make sense why we need such AI driven user centric chatbot and what can we achieve there, right? So it is a plug and play chatbot platform that enables like easy creation, easy prototyping and development, and it is leveraging the large language models. As I mentioned, it is kind of like AI model, right? Language model trained on like billions of parameters. Then It will allow users to train chatbots by uploading the data that I'm going to talk later on without requiring any coding skills, right? You don't need any coding skills, but you still can design and develop a chatbot. But the idea is you still need to understand the the architecture and the flow, right? Less technical. And in this way, it will make it accessible for technical and non-technical users, right? So this is our focus here. This is what we want to achieve. Okay, large language models, like every one of us here, like we know what LLM means, right? So there are many videos and lectures about LLM. So I won't dive very detailed into large language models, right? So large language models are AI models, right? Such as like GPT or Llama or Claude or like Gemini, you name it, right? They are trained on, as I mentioned, vast amounts of like textual data to understand users' queries, and they can process, they can think, and they can perform like human being a lot better, outperform the humans like capabilities. And it can add a human being in a very natural way based on the natural language model. And it is capable of processing complex diverse queries and producing like human like tests, right? So they use like very complex architectures such as like deep learning, neural network, or like transformer architectures and so on. But the ultimate goal here is user can ask a lot of questions that can be simple, that can be complex, that can be personalized, and ultimately it can generate, summarize, translate, and answers user queries like human conversation, human responses, right? And it is understanding the context, human language, and in the end, it will produce relevant, contextually uh, aware, coherent, outputs, um, but there is uh, no situation it will generate 100% accurate, right? It depends. So sometimes language models are still they're trying to figure out like how to accurately answer it and how to eliminate um the hallucination, for example, right? But I would say like the language models today are more and more much more smarter, more intelligent, because they are it is a feedback looping, right? So getting the feedback like trained with more data, like fine tuning the algorithms and so on. So they are becoming better and better and more optimized, right? So the question here is like why a large language model can be used or should be used for your user-centric chatbot. As I mentioned, right, your rule-based chatbot systems are pretty straightforward and pretty boring, I would say, right? Because they are not exciting when it comes to interacting with a chatbot system. So there are many ways to create to design and develop a chatbot system, right? Whether to be a user-centric or not is another story, right? But we can use the rule-based chatbot system, or like you can use like existing language models such as like GPT. You use GPT like to integrate with your chatbot, right? And the other one is you can create your own machine learning model from scratch that integrate with your chatbot, right? So in this case, we are interested in using large language models, uh, to be integrated with our chatbot systems. But because the reason is okay, advantages are they are intelligent, they are trained with huge amount of data, and also they are basically very natural in terms of like conversation or like generating answers. But the downside here is the existing language models are trained with are data. that may not be specific to your organization or to your company. So which is why they are called like general purpose like language models, right? So to overcome this, for example, you have a company of ABC, right? Your ABC company has a very confidential data, very secretive data, right? And that you do not want to share with like, general or like public language models, right? In that case, what you can do is you need to separately train the chatbot to be able to understand your business related information, relevant context aware information for your chatbot system, right? So which is why using language models is a good one, but it is not the perfect one because the answers like generated by the language models can be very limited and very generate. So to overcome this, what we need to do is we can fine tune the existing language models and integrate with your knowledge base so that your chatbot will be very much aware of like domain specific information, using an additional n- database such as like knowledge base, right? So I will talk more details later on, right? So this fine-tuning process will make sure that the chatbot that you are designing, you are developing will be generating accurate data, more relevant data, contextually aware responses that are aligned with your business objectives and also your business needs, right? They are very, very important here. Okay, so this is kind of like a very rough diagram of like, a consumer, a user asks questions to the chatbot. So chatbot here is a medium and that will connect with language models. But the question here is these language models are very generate and they are trained on like, billions of parameters, like, huge amount of data, but it is not specific to your information, your business related information. For example, you are running government related projects, right? You do not want to share that sensitive data to the general public domain, right? The language model. In that case, what we need to do is, you know, just using language models can produce the general answers or even sometimes incorrect answers back to the user, right? So what we can achieve here is like we will use this architecture. You have a tens of knowledge base, like the knowledge information inside your organization, but you do not want to share with like public language models. In that case, what we need to use here is we can use separate additional a database or knowledge based, right? So whenever a user asks questions, the chatbot will be retrieving the relevant information or the knowledge from the external database that is powered by your organization, your management, managed by your company, right? So what you do is just retrieve the relevant information from the database and combined with user's query, and you will enhance the queries so that like it can be passed to the language model, and using user's query and the retrieve and enhance result, language model can like better processed and like using and applying its power intelligence, it can you know provide very intelligent, contextually aware, very smart like outputs back to the users, right? So language models are very powerful, it's very capable, but the only challenge here is it has limited data when it comes to your organization, right? So we still want to apply the power of like language models such as like efficiency, accuracy, like contextually aware, human like natural language, right? This is not easy for your organization to develop from scratch, right? So which is why we can use like additional knowledge based and combine with user's query, and in the end it will generate more personalized recommendations, outputs, and so on, right? So in this case, right, having an additional knowledge base can be like, very important, right? So which is why your data quality and the management of your data before you train your model is very important, which is why the combination or the hybrid approach of your user-centered design, all the way from understanding context of use to evaluation and your data pipeline, is very, very important. You need to integrate like these two approaches, like these two methods together, so that in the end you will have a very user-centric chatbot. At the same time, you will be able to design and develop a knowledge-based and like knowledge driven, organizational driven, AI driven chatbot system for your organization, right? So the way how to achieve this, right? So it is very important for you to like structure your knowledge base, like you manage it, you design it before you actually train use your this data and integrate with your chatbot, right? So the knowledge representation is very, very important, like the data structuring also very important. This is kind of like very technically very complex topic, so I won't go very detailed into it. But your data preparation, your database design, your architecture, your modeling in terms of creating your database is crucial here. And the way the chatbot like retrieve, or like the way how your model will retrieve the information from the knowledge base is like very, very important, right? The optimal retrieval, because every time a user ask a question to the chatbot, you need to retrieve the information, right, when relevant. So the retrieval process must be like optimal, streamlined, so that like the questioning, the answering process will be very streamlined and very optimized, right? Okay, now this is another interesting topic, like strategies for like developing a language model power chatbot, right? So technically, like we have like four strategies, like prompt engineering, rag, fine-tuning, and pre-training, right? So pre-training is out of scope here, like out of context here, because you have to start creating your model from scratch. In that case, you will need a lot of data, you will need resources, you will need time, money, and so on, right? So this is beyond our capability. So which is why using language models, commercialized language models can be like an optimal solution, right? So if you have already decided to use like existing language models, so there are three approaches that we can use, like prompt engineering, right? So we can achieve like just creating prompt. We can create a language model driven chatbot. The second architecture is a RAG model, which is our focus in the lecture today. I will talk more details later on. We will need an additional knowledge base, right? So fine tuning is like you don't need any database, but you will need like the sample data, then feed into the model and fine tune it, and the model is likely to produce more accurate answers, right? Outputs. So in this case, I will be focusing on the RAG model, more details. The rest, I will be talking a little bit more, but we will not touch on the pre-training because it is very complex, very resource intensive, like, architecture, right? Okay, so retrieval augmented generation model is like one of the strategies that we can use when it comes to using large language model for chatbots, or in other words, like LLM driven chatbots for your systems, right? So it is kind of the hybrid approach or architecture that combine retrieving techniques, right? Retrieval based techniques where do we retrieve from your knowledge database? What are you going to retrieve? The knowledge documents, the knowledge information, right? Your business policy, product information, and so on, that you cannot have on the general purpose language model, right? So then whatever like retrieved information you combine with user's query, then of course like you're going to generate more accurate, more personalized, more user-friendly chatbots, right? So the main purpose here is to enhance responses by fetching, retrieving relevant information from your knowledge base or external source, right? So in this way, we can address the limitations of like general purpose like language models such as GPT, and reducing irrelevant or incorrect answers here, right? Okay, so this is a very interesting like architecture, very simple. At the same time, user will prompt the query like as a customer service bot, you know um what is the your return policy. The query will be like the as a customer service bot, right? And what is your return policy? So a user will be asking. Then your architecture, retrieval architecture, right? um you know what is the context, what is the query, return policy, which is kind of like very important, the main thing, right? Then when you get this query, then you will search relevant information from the knowledge source, your knowledge database, knowledge documents, right? So we have many architectures like vector database and so and so, right? Then your smart architecture model will retrieve the um relevant information such as like 30 day return, unworn items, blah blah blah. Then you are going back um to the like query, and what we are going to do is step number 4, prompt plus query plus the retrieve information. So this phase is called like augmentation, right? We enhance, we improve the context, the original query plus like more relevant business policy that is dedicated to your organization, right? Then we will pass this information to the language model. Based on the like their pre-trained data, the language model will uh, process it, and it will output, right, like a very human-like faction. It will respond, our return policy, blah, blah, blah. How can I assist you further returns? In that case, it is more intelligent, smarter, and also more human-like than the rule-based one, right? So this is kind of like one example. The conversations can be ongoing, right? More human-like, more natural. So this is the power of using not only the language model, but also your external knowledge, so that you will get um more organizational driven information here, right? So how does RAG work here? Retrieval. This retrieval process is very important. The model like first like retrieve relevant information from pre-index, right? So indexing is very important in RAG technique, what RAG architecture, from the knowledge base, right? So that will contain like FAQ, business policy, blah blah blah, and you can have more than one database, right? So this retrieval phase like make sure the model has access to factual, domain-specific content that is most relevant to the user query and more organizational driven, right? Okay, so the next one here is the augmentation part. So before we pass the information to the language model, you need the model's input is augmented by the retrieving relevant data from a knowledge source combined with the user's like original query, and the input data is enriched and aligned with the model's objective, right? So this is what we want to achieve: user's original query plus your retrieve information By combining these two, we will feed into the GPT, and GPT will process based on their pre-trained data, then it will generate the output, right? So this is how augmentation, the generation part is a very, very important too. So the system synthesizes a human-like responses. The generative model leverages the augmented information to produce a coherent, more contextually relevant and personalized answers like human being, and the answers are more accurate, right? So which is why combining retrieval with retrieval technique with generative models is very important. So make sure indexing, data retrieval, augmentation, generation, they are all important, right? So these are the advantages of using RAG model in in chatbots, such as kind of accuracy, context awareness, scalability. You can, if you want to add more and more data to your knowledge base, you can definitely do it, and improve user experience is kind of like that what we want to achieve, right? Okay, so RAG is like, very good architecture, but if you do not want to use RAG, we have another approach, which is called fine-tuning, right? So in fine-tuning, you don't need external or additional database. What you do here is like, you will have like, the sample data that is relevant to your organization. Then you fine-tune the model, feeding these pre-prepared and processed data into the model and fine-tune it, adjust the parameters. Then in the end, after fine-tuning, right, the model can generate accurate answer, right? In that case, um, you still need to feed your business information into the model can generate it, right? So in that case, you may not need you may want to eliminate the requirement for external database, right? So fine tuning is another popular technique in chatbot development or large language model driven applications, right? So you need to choose one pre-trained model such as like Gemini or like Llama, and domain specific data you need to prepare, you need to pre-process, then you feed these data into the language model, then you fine tune it by adjusting the model's like parameters, and there are like more complex algorithms and the techniques, right? So I recommend you to further look into it if you are interested in that, in this topic, right? And in the end, right, the language model will create or generate more improved accurate result, right? So similarly, it has like, advantages like more personalized output, accurate output, more efficient, like, the conversation, right? Users can actually achieve what they want to achieve in interacting with the chatbot. Okay, the last one here is like all of us, like we are more or less familiar, right? In that case, you don't need to have any kind of data. You don't need to, um, you know, prepare any pre-processed data. In that case, we were mainly using the general purpose language model, but the thing is we will teach the language model to perform and to generate the answers that are closely aligned with what we want to achieve, which is called prompt engineering, right? So many of us, like we have heard about this for some time. So prompt engineering refers to the process of like creating, writing, crafting the input prompts. So you are kind of like guiding the language models like how to act, right? How to perform, what kind of outputs they should produce, right? You are teaching, right? By creating, crafting the prompts, right? And this prompt will be fed into the language model, and language model will generate the result, right? So technically, you are guiding the chatbot like what to generate so that it will, output like accurate answers, more contextually aware and relevant responses, right? So fine tune, if you can do like, prompt engineering effectively, sometimes it is very useful and effective for most use cases, right? In that case, like your fine tuning process or rack architecture can be eliminated, right? So there are many like ways of prompting techniques, like many prompting techniques. Very um common one is zero shot. So zero shot prompting, like we normally do, right? Whenever we ask questions to the our chat GPT, like we do not give any example unless you are very specific about what you want to get from the language model. So zero shot is like just asking the straightforward question and you don't explain much or you don't include any examples, right? In that case, like in most cases, like you may get accurate answers, but if your answers are very specific, very domain driven, then zero shot may not be effective. So in that case, like what you are going, for example, like you want to ask about, like um what are the benefits of a chatbot, right? So it depends, right? There are many types of chatbot for like customer service, or chatbot for consultant, or chatbot for medicine, many other things, right? So what are the benefits of a chatbot? Like the answers will be very, very generate, right? So if you want to avoid that situation, few shot prompting will be very useful. You give examples, not only one, a few examples, and let the chatbot know what exactly you are wanting, you want to get, right? In that case, like you include a few examples in your prompt itself, right? For example, few shot, when will my order will be delivered? Example response, your order will be delivered in 3 to 5 business days, right? So this is kind of like the examples, like that you want to include in your future prompting, right? Okay. Okay, so if you're designing, prompt engineering for like Chula students, right? So we have like we may have created, like very Chula driven, like the question answer format, right? So we teach, like the Chula chatbot, right, to be able to answer this and that, right, using the large language model. So we feed a few examples, like a few short into the language model, and language model will learn from your examples, and they will kind of like generate more accurate answers, right? More relevant, more aligned answers, more aligned to your business, right? So the next one is very interesting, chain of thought, but actually they are very complex. I want you to, like further research on all these topics, right? Okay, chain of thought is basically um the language model will add, or like think, like what do you call that, human, like human, right, to be reasonable, which is called reasoning, like step by step, like technique, right? So chain of thought basically means that the language model will think step by step in a very reasonable way, right? Then it will explain you reasonably, right? So the last the last GPT model, right, the zero um GPT, like strawberry model, right? O1, right? So this is very reasonable when it comes to answering how it generates the answer step by step, right? It's more explainable, more reasonable, right? So you can do the same thing when you're prompting your crafting your prompts for your chatbot from your language model. Okay, so this prompt engineering technique is very important when it comes to, you don't, the scenario of like use case of like you don't want rag or like fine tuning. In most use cases, like your prompt engineering technique can be very useful and effective, but a lot of iteration and fine tuning will be um necessary. Okay, now is the last stage of user-centered design, like the evaluation part, right? So what you're going to evaluate, as I mentioned, two things, right? First of all, before you deploy your chatbot, you need to make sure, you need to evaluate, you need to do assessment. The output generated by your chatbot is the output that your chatbot generates. Are they trustworthy? Are they reliable? Are they aligned with your business goals? Are they very specific to your business? So we need to make sure chatbot effectiveness and the quality of the output, right? Which is why evaluation is very important. So this is one thing. The other one is the usability part, right? So you need to integrate your chatbot with the e-commerce website or like your mobile application, and we need to check, are they compatible, and the chatbot is functioning the way that you expected, or like it is acting like strangely, which is why usability testing is very important, followed by understanding, investigating the user satisfaction, right? They are all important in evaluation. So to make sure the quality of the um, chatbot contents outputs, we can use like multiple techniques such as like blue score, red score, perplexity, and so on. They are very technical actually, except human evaluation. So human evaluation should be always implemented in your evaluation, because we cannot 100% rely on these, like, the techniques. The human judgment is always necessary. For example, blue score, right, that will check, like, compare the overlap contents between your original text and the chatbot generated text. Reg basically evaluate how much of the reference text is captured in the generated response. So you can choose either one of them followed by the human evaluation. So human evaluation, we can create our own metrics such as relevancy, conciseness, like response time, fluency and grammar, and so on. Then human will evaluate it, right? You can use a specific scale, for example, 1 to 5. So combining the human evaluation and one of these techniques, we can um, improve the quality of the chatbot. And the last one is, you guys know, usability testing, right? You combine the chatbot with your e-commerce system, right? Then you conduct the usability testing, right? Which is very important. You recruit your potential target users and let them use your system. Then, like, investigate their responses, they gather their qualitative data, quantitative data, and so on, such as like user satisfaction. So these are the tools that are very common, like system usability scale, chatbot usability scale, customer satisfaction, and so on, right? So now you have already tested it, and based on the feedback and the observation, the findings from your evaluation, you need to iteratively refine the chatbot to improve its contents, and also to improve the users, like usability and user experience, right? So once you are satisfied with the chatbot performance, you can start integrating your system with your chatbot with other existing systems like enterprise applications, CRM, databases, and so on, right? And also make sure like your chatbot is, like, acting like, consistently in different platforms. They are all important here. So remember, we have to be very careful, like user privacy, data security, and continuous improvement. They are all important in chatbot development, right? Because you are dealing with, sometimes you may be dealing with sensitive data, right? So make sure you are following the right protocol, you're being ethical in terms of managing the data, and so on. So be transparent, be responsible, be explainable in what you're doing, right? So this is our ultimate goal of like human-centered AI design, right? So by recap, like, creating an AI driven feature or interface is like very important, but how to make it user centric, human centric, ethical, responsible is very important, which is why we can use like our existing human centered approach, user centered approach, and like use them as a guideline together with our data pipeline, our architecture, right? So by doing so, in the end, we will be able to design and develop a data-driven, a user-centric, AI-driven features for our system. And in this case, the chatbot is our example, right? So that's all, like, in summary, an LLM powered chatbot can enhance like business efficiency by delivering personalized, more accurate responses and better user experience, right? So this is all about the lecture today. I want and it is a gentle introduction to the architecture and all relevant topics. I want you to look further into more topics. Like we have tens of YouTube videos and like textbook, like blogs, Medium. You can look more details into it. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next lecture.